In this lecture, I'm going to talk about the difference between inductive and deductive research. This was one of the more complicated concepts that I myself had, trouble understanding, and so I'm gonna. It took me a while to learn this, so I understand if this is kind of a difficult concept for you to understand. Hopefully, I can explain it to you that in a way that helps you learn it a little bit quicker than I did. So before we talk about the difference between inductive and deductive research, I want to introduce you to the research circle. The research circle is a visual diagram that represents the research process. And there are four basic components of the research process. Theory, which represents a set of ideas that help you explain a particular social phenomenon. A hypothesis, which is a testable prediction about the relationship between two or more variables. Empirical observations, things that you pick out and identify or can label in the social world. And then analysis, things like statistics and qualitative data analysis, where you're analyzing themes from interviews or observations, or using statistics to identify patterns within numerical data. So these are the different components of the research process. Inductive and deductive research specify kind of where you begin on this research project, where your research journey starts. That is really what distinguishes inductive from deductive research, because in inductive research, you begin with a research question, and that research question guides your collection of empirical data, which you then use to generate a testable hypothesis or a tentative hypothesis, which you confirm with additional data. And then that data becomes the basis for forming a social theory, a set of ideas that you can use to explain your topic. So with inductive research, you're beginning by collecting data. So you're collecting empirical observations about the social world. Based on those empirical observations, you're forming a hypothesis, which you then use to test with additional data to develop a theory. So in inductive research, you're beginning with empirical observations. Now that differs from deductive research, in which you begin by reviewing a particular social theory, and based on that theory, you form a hypothesis, which you then test with empirical data, and either confirm or refute that hypothesis based on your analysis of that data. So deductive research approaches begin with a theory-driven hypothesis. So there might be an existing theory to explain a particular topic, and you form a hypothesis that's based on that theory, which then guides your data collection and analysis. So you might design a particular survey to collect information about a set of variables in your hypothesis, which you then analyze, and that feeds back to the theory. So you might add to or maybe revise a particular theory based on your analysis. Now let me give you some examples of inductive and deductive research approaches. An example of an inductive research question might be, how do undergraduate students view the causes of homelessness? What do they perceive as the solutions to homelessness? Rather than identifying an existing social theory, with this research question, you might begin by collecting data from a group of undergraduate students and really try to understand how they view the causes of homelessness. What do they perceive as the solutions to homelessness? So this was a published article in the Journal of Poverty recently, and this is inductive because you're beginning by with a set of you're beginning by collecting data. You're interviewing students and trying to understand how they view the causes of homelessness and how they view the solutions, and then these observations might lead you to develop a hypothesis where you test with data, and you use that information to develop a theory. So it's inductive because you're starting with the data collection. Now, deductive, an example of a research question that's more deductive in nature is are perceptions of discrimination among young adults related to psychological distress? And does discrimination help to explain racial differences in depressive symptoms? So this research question is deductive because it actually these research questions and the hypotheses that can be formulated from the research question are sort of drawing from an existing social theory. It's actually the stress process theory that specifies how stress is related to health and how social characteristics affect exposure to stress and how personal social resources moderate the relationship between stress and health. And so based on the stress process theory, this researcher was able to conduct a study to form a hypothesis about one form of social stress, discrimination, and how it relates to psychological distress. So this was deductive research in the sense that there was an existing social theory. The researcher formed a hypothesis, collected data in the form of a survey, and used that data to analyze and test that hypothesis and update existing social theory.